What makes a political party more than just a campaign machine? Is a political party simply an election vehicle, a convenient banner under which candidates seek office? Or is it something more, an institution with values, standards, and mechanisms of accountability that outlive the ambitions of any one individual? This week, Germany offered an interesting reminder of what political parties are supposed to do. Jens Spahn, a senior member of the Christian Democratic Union, came under intense pressure within his own party after revelations that he had procured surrogacy services abroad, despite the CDU's long-standing opposition to commercial surrogacy and its repeated defense of traditional family policy. The debate quickly became bigger than one man's private choices. It became a question of institutional integrity. Could a senior leader publicly represent a party while privately acting in direct contradiction to one of its stated principles? Now, whether one agrees with the CDU's position on surrogacy is besides the point. What matters is that the party believed its own values should apply first to those who claim to represent them. Because institutions understand something personalities often forget. Credibility is collective. When one member's conduct threatens public trust, the institution itself has a responsibility to respond. Britain offers another lesson. Political fortunes rise and fall in every democracy. But when confidence in a leader diminishes, political parties have established processes for renewal. Leadership contests are held, internal debates take place, successors emerge. The party survives because it is built to be larger than any individual who temporarily leads it. Temporarily. That is what mature political institutions do. They correct themselves before the electorate is forced to do it for them. Now compare that with our own politics. Here in Kenya, parties rarely appear to discipline members for conduct that falls below the standards they claim to uphold. Members make inflammatory remarks. Others engage in behavior that attracts widespread public condemnation. Some defend themselves vigorously in the face of public outrage. Occasionally, apologies follow. More often, they do not. Take the recent case of a senator whose remarks directed at a young girl visiting Parliament sparked widespread criticism. The public demanded accountability. Civil society weighed in. Eventually, an apology was issued. But where was the political party? Where was the institutional voice saying, "This does not reflect who we are"? Or consider the all too familiar scenes that have become almost routine in our country. Elected leaders exchanging blows in public, inflammatory ethnic rhetoric during campaigns, blatant disregard for party positions once elections are over, or public attacks on constitutional institutions by those sworn to uphold them. You see, the headlines come and go, the outrage fades, but meaningful party censure is remarkably rare. Our parties rarely ask whether a member's conduct reflects the values they claim to uphold. Instead, discipline often appears reserved for those who challenge the party leadership, not those who undermine the party's principles. A member may make remarks that provoke national outrage. Another may engage in conduct that embarrasses the institution. Yet the loudest calls for accountability almost always come from the public, not from the party itself. And maybe that's because many of our political parties have ceased to function as institutions. They're simply electoral vehicles, organized around personalities rather than principles. Loyalty is often measured not by fidelity to party ideals, but by loyalty to an individual leader. And that's a profound difference. You see, in functioning democracies, discipline is not merely punishment. It is reassurance. It tells citizens that standards apply equally, even to those on the inside. It signals that the institution values its integrity more than the convenience of protecting one of its own. Without that, accountability becomes entirely external. It falls to journalists, to the courts, to civil society, to angry citizens on social media, and ultimately to voters every 5 years. But by then, the damage has often already been done. Democracy does not depend on flawless politicians. There are none. It depends on institutions strong enough to recognize failure, confront it honestly, and correct it without fear or favor. And perhaps that is the question we should be asking. Not whether Kenyan politicians make mistakes, they will, but whether our political parties still see themselves as institutions with a duty to uphold standards, or whether merely as vehicles designed to win the next election. Institutions endure because they're willing to police themselves. Campaign machines exist only to win elections.
There is something I have been thinking about this week. Do leaders actually listen, or do they simply wait for their turn to speak? I've listened to several speeches this week. Campaign speeches, development speeches, political speeches. Promises are made. Big promises. Economic transformation, industrialization, mega projects. And as I listened, one question kept coming back to me. Is that really what the people are asking for? Maybe, maybe not. Sometimes I think leaders answer questions that nobody asked. You arrive in a village with a 1 billion shilling vision, but the mother sitting in front of you is wondering where tomorrow's meal will come from. You're talking about economic transformation. She's thinking about the nearby hospital that has no medicine. You're talking about regional trade. The young man is wondering where he will get a job. You're talking about digital innovation. The farmer, on the other hand, wants fertilizer. You're talking about exports, but the cattle owner wants a functioning cattle dip. Someone else wants water, or electricity, or streetlights, or better security. These may not sound like grand ideas, but to the people living there, they are the things that change lives. Then I watch our politics. The huge convoy arrives. The music plays. Leaders climb on top of their vehicles. The microphones then come out. Then the speech begins. Blah, 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 blah. Si ndio, ndio. Si ndio, ndio. And I find myself wondering, ndio to what? Has anyone actually asked the people what they need? Because listening is different from hearing applause. Listening requires questions. It requires patience and humility. You see, you may not have all the answers, and that is okay. But surely leadership begins by asking the right questions and listening. Questions like, if I solved one problem, only one problem for this community, what should it be? I don't think those are difficult questions. The difficult part is making time to listen to the answers. Most leaders don't really speak with citizens. They speak at them or over them. And then they move on to the next rally, the next church, the next funeral, the next roadside stop, the next microphone. And then more promises, more speeches. And sometimes I wonder, don't all these meetings eventually start sounding the same? Maana viongozi hujirudia sana. Perhaps that is why some promises end up sounding disconnected from the people's reality. Because if you don't listen, how will you know what needs fixing? The people actually know what they need. In fact, they have probably been telling us all along. The question is, are our leaders listening? Je, wanasikiliza?
On my KAIKA tonight, I reached out to two parents that I have never met. I only saw them introducing themselves on the social media and in apparent distress.
I'm Emily. I would like to send this message to Kenyans and any other person outside Kenya that might have come across this video that has been trending on TikTok or maybe Facebook about my family and my child that I'm seated with here. I want to say to Kenyans that I'm a responsible mother.
Apparently, these parents are having to explain themselves after a relative posted a video on the social media showing them using some tough methods to discipline their own son.
The video that has been shared is not the reality. It has been misinterpreted by Kenyans. That I'm a cruel mother, I'm a mother who doesn't care for her children, or maybe I'm not the right mother, or maybe somebody might have taken that this is not my child.
And here is the reason Emily and her husband took the measures they did.
Was trying to use another method of instilling some discipline in him because of the cheekness and a certain behavior that he was developing. He could sneak into my wallet or the father's and pick some 50 bob or 100 or what. So when I tried to talk to the child, or maybe sometimes cane kidogo, I didn't see the child picking. So as a family, we sat and decided that we use another method to see that we make our child grow up responsibly and in the rightful way, the way children should be brought up.
So theft was involved and money was involved. And the reformed young suspect owns up.
I was stealing my mother and my father money. I'm sorry, Dad and Mom. That was a mistake. I will never try that again. Sorry.
And the father confirms there was no intention to cause harm, just a discipline instilling process.
To scare the child from the habits that he was developing, and therefore, from that time he has changed. He is now a disciplined boy.
Now, to Emily and her husband, listen to me. You owe no one an explanation for what you have to do to raise your child responsibly, as long as you do not break the law. Parenting is a lonely space, and every parent strives on a daily basis to carry out one of the toughest, unscripted tasks undertaken by the human race. Whenever parenting is discussed in certain contexts, judgment out there can be brutally harsh.
Parenting is a God-given responsibility. Don't abdicate your responsibility of parenting. Don't surrender it to the church or to the government. Parenting is a responsibility given to parents by God.
I don't know if you parents understand whom you are leaving your children to. First of all, you assume that the teachers that used to teach you are the same teachers that are in school. You are forgetting that the teachers that are in school now teaching your children are Gen Z teachers who are struggling, first of all, to bring up a family. So another generation of Gen Z is bringing up your child who is a Gen Z. And you are hoping that school will take care of it.
Now, to Emily and your husband, again, remember the Kiswahili adage, asiyefunzwa na mamaye hufunzwa na ulimwengu. Do not apologize. Do not explain yourselves. Just do your best in the interest of your child.
You mentioned that, it's two people died. So it's not nothing. Mm-hmm. Two people died, two families of two people are mourning.
In a simple by-election.
In a simple by-election, and the burial was today. Mm. And reports from Ol Kalou, even I mentioned the feature that NTV did, showed the masked men, there were armed men, there were unmarked vehicles, there were clashes, there was intimidation near polling stations. And this election day disorder came even after IBC had already warned that continued violence could threaten the poll. Because they were asked, even before the elections, about these unmarked vehicles that were moving around Ol Kalou. And they said, oh, anyone who is doing that, they'll face the full force of the law. YVON, it happened, and you cannot play it down. Because the question you need to ask is then, who are these people? Who recruited them? Who transported them? Who paid them? Because there must have been some resources.
Who's filling the cars?
Yeah, who's filling the cars? Where did the equipment come from? And why were they confident enough to operate so openly? And I know no arrests have been made. 2 people have died. Because the CS also today said that, investigations need to be done, police need to take action. Okay. So will the investigations reach the organizers or only the people we saw on the ground? Because there must have been people behind them. I think even the tragedy with this issue of goons and political goons is that leaders often speak as though these goons spontaneously materialize. Wanatokelezea tu. They do not. The convoy you see requires the vehicles. These goons require equipment. There needs to be some sort of organization of the violence. And there has to be some money because they are paid for it. Remember after the All Saints one, they spoke about payment.
Yeah.
So you need to find out, other than who's holding the weapon, which is the mind that had that hand to hold that weapon.
And the pockets.
And who paid for it. So the president said that security agencies need to crack down on goonism, and that criminality cannot be defended as youth activism, then action needs to be taken, not just kusemwa. There needs to be arrests, there needs to be investigations, there needs to be identification of financiers, there needs to be prosecution, and there should be equal application of the law. We talked about the Okoth Obado case, there was equal application of the law. So reports, as of now, I don't think anyone has been arrested in relation to the Olkalau violence and the death of 2 people and what was seen. Even after the president directive, even after the CS has spoken today. So Yvonne, I think we need to see that action is being taken, that goons are stopped, that the state needs to use the intelligence and the investigators and the prosecutors and the police to take action. Because you keep saying elections is just a year away, but we're seeing this, and the worry is if this is not stopped or nipped in the bud now, the worry is what may happen next year, and the stakes are higher when it's a national election, when there are all these seats to defend and to try and win.
But let's look at the messaging from the voter's side that comes out of receiving so much and voting the other way. Is there a message that the voter is also sending? I've seen a lot of narratives that in central Kenya there is a saying that you don't bury an elephant with its tusks. Get the tusks and then bury the elephant. Is this what happened in the case of UDA and DCP in Olkalau? The voter is also saying something else. But I don't put it entirely to the voter alone, but the contest between President William Ruto and Rigathi Gachagua in Mount Kenya. Because Olkalau, though technically is actually in Rift Valley region, Nyandarua is Rift Valley, in the old arrangement of things, voted to approve Gachagua. It gave Gachagua a very clear mandate and a very bragging rights as far as the politics of Mount Kenya are concerned. But, and that's exactly how it's being interpreted, that is this then setting the momentum for how Mount Kenya will vote in 2027. There've already been a lot of differences between the leaders who come from the region that are in different, on the opposing sides. Remember, Deputy President Kithure Kindiki framed this as a race that will restore respect to Kutane Pale Olkalau for some contest that will settle the question of respect. Now it looks like the respect went with the
other way.
The other way. And again, I say that the reason we saw this kind of confidence, especially on the government side, is because Mbeere North, the script worked very, very well. Mbeere North was not an easy race. The opposition was actually united at the time, calling itself United Opposition and supporting the Democratic Party candidate, who still lost on account of a few hundred votes. And there's the other thing that really contributed, and one of the bragging rights for UDA, is they did a better job in mobilizing the turnout, because by-elections are about turnout. Will your supporters turn out to vote? Are they motivated to fill a seat for just 1 year before the general election? Because there are other places that will say, no, it's okay, whoever takes will only serve for a year in any case, and then next year we'll make a decision. So there's this whole issue of motivating the voter, which is why we saw a lot of that happening on both sides, motivate the voters to turn out. And Olkalau, in the process, I haven't looked at the statistics, but I can we can safely project that it's one of the highest turnouts in by-elections.
Yes,
by-elections.
70%.
57%,
Yes.
according to IBC.
57%. Look at that. That's really, really high for by-elections. Voters are ordinarily not motivated to go to polling stations on days like that. But because of how this has been positioned, that this is about 2027, this is about Rigathi versus President Ruto, this is about UDA versus DCP needs to get a new seat. All these factors were at play, and of course cylinders were also at play.
And you know, I understand the law as it is now, but for me, I think also perhaps one of the lessons that we can take from this moving forward is how our justice system can also address the death of her unborn baby. Perhaps I watch too many movies or watch what happens in the West, but I would have liked to see this as being a double murder. So it's a 7-month-old child, you know, who also didn't come to life as a result of Sharon Otieno's murder. And hopefully we evolve to a stage where we recognize an unborn baby's death as murder, because those were 2 lives that were lost that day in that forest.
And you see, I need to just say this because I keep talking about the silent informal players in exercising power. When you give a lot of power to informal hands,
dangerous.
What it does is those institutions actually become weak. So sometimes you can see a fully uniformed policeman with crown and ranks and all that. But if there is an informal setup that actually controls the real power, that becomes a problem. It works the same way in politics. In the old days, there was a president and there was a government where some ministers, assistant ministers, were more powerful than the ministers. In the same structure that actually saw the rise of Rigathi Gachagua, there was something called the special DOs. Special DOs, special district officers, were junior officers, but they were sometimes more powerful than the provincial commissioner. So these informal arrangements, what they do is they basically weaken the institutions so much so that you can see someone in full uniform, but they don't actually have power. At this point, maybe it's a time to ask whether IG, the real Inspector General of Police, actually has any say on some of these things. Let him go and stand in Olkalau and tell us what was going on with those black SUVs if those informal games are not at play. And what an end for Okoth Obado, because we know that this is not the only legal battle he's had in recent times. There was a time he was facing very, very serious corruption charges and has had to, among other things, enter into a bargain with the prosecution so that he can return some of the property that was in question. So overall, a very bad ending for Okoth Obado, who, by the way, if you ever met him, you wouldn't think he would hurt a fly from his tone and gentlemanly ways. Joseph, you know, Okoth Obado speaks softly. You may not hear him from the end of this table. He speaks very softly, he's very gentlemanly. It's just tragic and terrible that he is indeed confirmed to have done what amounts to a very, very gruesome murder, Yvonne.
I think Yvonne...
You know, we are not thinking about the true consequences of some of these games. And I remember in 2007, 2008, we in the media having to run headlines saying, "Save our country." There was just synchronized headline across the newspapers. Television stations also carried the same commentary about saving the country. Saving the country from things we know could have been avoided. You see at this face, and you listen to the interior CS there, Kipchumba Murkomen, we are not serious about the goons issue. We just need to be honest about it. We are not serious about it. When you say, and Bonyo, you spoke about it earlier, when you say bishops have turned around from initially supporting Goonism or what? Turned around from where? Every sensible person, and luckily they are the majority in this country, have been talking about this Goonism being a potentially costly game. But what we see from government is a lot of talk and little action. And let's be frank and explain why. Because you cannot tackle a problem you are a part of. And I want us, for just illustration purposes, Robert, to show those SUVs in Olkalau, the black vehicles that were in Olkalau. We can talk about that as we see those vehicles that went to Olkalau. Now, these ones were used during the demos, that is the Gen Z anniversary demos. These are, well, they could say these are security people, policemen, DCI, and other special services put together to contain lawlessness, but of course in a way that has been questioned even at court level, where some of that dress code is not considered appropriate for public order. You should dress like this when fighting terrorism and hardcore criminals, not dispersing demonstrators. I had us to go to Olkalau because there were vehicles there, as illustrated in our reports the other day. There they are. Now, this is why it's difficult to deal with Goonism, because Goonism has official elements in it. Those vehicles are not driven by goons, a regular definition of goon. They're owned by people, as exposed by NTV the other day, that they're owned by people with proper addresses who have apparently not been questioned up to now. Even the simple question of where was your car on this date has not been asked. Because Murkomen cannot do that, because that will cut too close. And we've seen governments doing some of these silly things before. In the case of President Mwai Kibaki, it was the Artur brothers who came here, foreigners, came here and were given ranks of police commissioners. They are very, very serious, up the ranks of commissioners. And I think it is something that people in power sometimes forget, that some of these games can be really bad. All you need for this to go really wrong is a counter madness. Just somebody else to run another number of similar vehicles with people with the capacity to fire from the sunroof. And what you have is no country. These games have been allowed to go too far. If government is actually committed, we've seen the president talk, we've seen the CS Interior talking a lot. First of all, prove commitment by questioning. Don't even charge. Just have the courage to question the occupants of these vehicles and let them not be masked. That way, you will have demonstrated that indeed you know and you believe that goonism, the culture of goons, is a problem. Because this country is paying a very heavy price for these ping-pong games where politicians say one thing and do the other. I've seen other sound bites that we've played here today about some politicians criticizing goonism. And, the proverbial log in the eye.
And the huge speck.
And the huge speck. We just need to get serious. And especially government needs to get serious with this. Last week we spoke about the increasing culture of use of informal power, exercise of informal power. Because I don't want to imagine what was happening in Olkalau. Who was commanding those people? It cannot be the police service. It can be just another random guy who enjoys access to power. Just like the Artur and Sagasian brothers who are here running a very informal operation supported by elements in the state. And in it, they used their powers to go and ban newspapers, the standard newspapers, on the 3rd of May, was it, in some 2005 or thereabout. And when I confronted the Minister for Internal Security, that is MURKOMEN's predecessor, is called John Njoroge Mishuki, a man who really liked expressing power, sometimes in very physical ways, if expressions are anything to go by. And I asked him, why would the government do what has happened in the standard newspapers? And he told me, those are government jobs. And I asked again, but why, Waziri? And he said, if you rattle a snake, prepare to be bitten
by it.
And I still remember the finger actually worked a bit like a snake. And that is impunity. That is the environment around which some of these players in politics, in power politics, operate. They completely forget that some of those games can be dangerous. Like I said, what is missing right now is equivalent madness outside the existing madness. If you run 3 SUVs with people who are just shooting others, I remember the poor policemen in uniform there had also to duck for cover because they are being fired at. That in itself is an image of just how much can go wrong. And I want to agree with CS MURKOMEN on one thing. Today he said the bodyguards
have been turned
into goons. So, and how many of our uniformed services are also being used in this manner? I think there's need to pause and there's need to stop the blame game. Bishops are not just an around. A lot of reasonable Kenyans have been saying, can we stop? Can we end this culture of goonism? Now, I think the call should be to government. Just be honest about this. Let the seers also be very sincere about goonism. Don't say things that you cannot take an oath about.